and shooters like a black-clad General MacArthur. "Don't let them take a fucking breath! Keep the pressure on! Hey, Governor!" Lily tries to get his attention from behind the M35. "Hey!" Another hail of bullets streaks down from the tower. The governor doesn't even flinch, the blasts puffing at his feet. And all at once another militia member goes down in a burst of blood mist from the back of his skull, the man's caterpillar cap flying off as he drops to the ground. "Governor!" Lily screams at the man. "They're killing us! We can't do this!" Some of the men are backing away from the line of fire now, searching for cover, running this way and that, diving under truck chassis. "The fuck are you doing?" the governor booms at the retreating troops. "We can't give up now! We can't let them win!" Another volley of sniper fire drives Lily back to the ground behind the M35. Austin on his belly inches away from her, gouts of turf kicking up with each blast, dirt spitting in their faces. Dizziness washes over Lily and threatens to steal her eyesight, her ears ringing so badly now that the gunfire sounds as if it's underwater. Pling, pling, plink, plink, plink. And she hears the governor bellowing something and tries to see through the growing haze of dust and gun smoke engulfing the meadow. "Fuck it!" The governor marches toward the tank like a wooden soldier, his single arm flexing stiffly, his solitary gloved hand balled into a tight fist. "Fuck it! Fuck it! Fuck it! It's time to end this!" He reaches the Abrams and then climbs up the steel side ladder. In Lily's compromised vision, as watery and bleary as runny ink, she can barely take in the surreal sight of the governor pounding on the tank's hatch, as though he has a parcel to deliver to the crew. He howls at Jared to let him in, and then the hatch unscrews suddenly, springing open like a jack-in-the-box. The governor plunges down into the darkness of the enclosure, the hatch slamming shut just as his booming cry reaches Lily's ringing ears. "Just drive!" A plume of dense smoke suddenly spews from the back of the tank as the treads engage. The engine roars, and the beast begins to move. Lily freezes on the ground, gaping at the bizarre sight of the armored monolith rolling toward the fence. Her irises dilate involuntarily, her breath stalling in her throat, as she sees the course of the battle suddenly take an unexpected turn. The tank rattles toward the chain-link barrier, mowing over the last few walkers that still stand in its way, the massive treads pulverizing rotten bones and flesh. The front of the tank slams into the fence, the chain-link and concertina wire heaving, the reverberations traveling a city block in each direction. The noise is like a metallic rainstorm. The outer fence gives way in a paroxysm of steel ripping apart. The Abrams grinds over the first barrier with the ease of a giant trash compactor, smoke billowing from its turbine, treads smashing the chain link into spaghetti. 100 yards of cyclone fence in each direction collapses as the beast crosses the gap to the next fence. The second barrier goes down as easily as the first. While all this is transpiring, Lily observes the eerie ceasefire inside the prison grounds. The only sounds now, barely audible above the creaking, complaining, ringing chain-link fences, are footsteps running in all directions, as the folks inside scatter for cover. In a dust cloud of haze and crisscrossing sniper fire pinging off the tank's iron carapace, the Abrams devours the last barrier, the innermost fence, as sparks snap and crackle in the air. Most of the walkers in the general vicinity have been vanquished either in the crossfire or beneath the treads of the tank. Now the ricochets echo eerily across the passageways between cell blocks. Soon, even the towers go silent and still, as the armored monolith comes to rest 20 feet inside the gate, trailing shreds of metal linkage in its treads like particles of food stuck in the teeth of a ravenous monster. The engine revs for a moment, almost like an overture to the next movement of this terrible symphony. Exhaust huffs from the ass end of the tank. The pause that follows, the duration of which is mere seconds, seems to Lily to last for hours. "Lily, you all right? Talk to me!" Austin's voice, barely audible to Lily, cuts through the white noise of her racing thoughts. She turns and sees him huddled next to her behind the M35's rear gate, his M1 Garand gripped white-knuckle tight. "What do you think?" he asks her with fear shimmering in his eyes. "What now?" She starts to mumble something in response when the sound of another voice cuts through her daze. "Come on! We got him outnumbered!" It comes from behind her. She twists around and sees the remaining members of the militia coming out from behind the vehicles with their guns raised and ready. Tom Blanchford, a big mechanic from Macon, has his back pressed against the side of his flatbed. "Come on! Let's put these evil bastards out of their misery once and for all! Come on!" One by one, creeping low and quick, weaving between the vehicles, the surviving men and women of the Woodbury militia make their way across the battlefield, over the smashed remnants of mangled chain link, and into the prison. "Let's do this," Austin says, rising to his feet and then reaching down to help Lily up. For the briefest instant, she pauses. She stares at Austin's hand. She feels the pulse of acid throbbing in her spine, down her arms and legs, tasting of copper and blood in her mouth. Then, in a hoarse, faint whisper, she says, "Yeah, let's finish it." She takes his hand, springs to her feet, swings the Remington around into shooting position, gives a quick nod, and charges into the fray. Chapter 16. Inside the prison yard, in a fog bank of dust, the tank's top hatch bursts open, and a dark, cadaverous, blood-caked face surfaces like a shark emerging from the oceanic darkness. "Open fire! Kill them all! We got them pinned down!" On either side of the tank, a total of 7 members of the Woodbury militia fan out in different directions, most of them leading with the barrels of their assault rifles, shooting at anything that moves. The exercise yard crawls with chaos for a moment. The prison's inhabitants flee for cover, retreating into the convolutions of the buildings, cockroaches vanishing into cracks. Bursts of automatic gunfire crackle and echo back and forth. Movement blurs. The governor shouts orders from the tank's hatch that get drowned in the noise. Gunners on either side dart behind the corners of buildings or under shadowy overhangs, searching for cover and purchase in the onslaught. One of the governor's men takes the initiative to climb the southeast guard tower, his buck knife clenched between his teeth, his M4 strapped to his shoulder. The tide of the battle is turned, the denizens of the prison now scattering for cover, and the most expedient ways to escape. Lily and Austin followed the last contingent over the fallen fence and into the prison yard, their heavy bootsteps making the chain link jangle. They moved quickly with their guns cocked and ready, hot on the heels of 2 other men, the sun in their eyes. Lily has a pistol in each hand, her Remington strapped and bouncing on her shoulder. Austin hyperventilates as he runs, a combination of fear, exhaustion, and rage. The passage of time seems to slow, now moving in milky, syrupy impressions, as Lily and Austin reach the closest building, 30 feet away from the governor's tank, and slam their backs against the stone wall. Lily's heart races. Even amid the adrenaline rush of storming the grounds, she feels a surreal kind of claustrophobia inside the massive compound. 3-story cell blocks press down on them from all sides, throwing long shadows on the yards. The air has the acrid smell of overloading circuits and burning rubber. Muffled voices and the sound of running emanate from within the walls. A moment later, Lily jerks at a flash of movement between 2 buildings, raises one of the Rugers, fires a single shot at the blur, and hits nothing but stucco wall. She sees the puff of plaster dust atomizing in the shadows 20 yards away. She glances across the yard at the tank. She sees the governor climbing out of the iron beast with a Tech-9 pistol gripped in his gloved hand. Then she sees something else in the distance behind the governor that makes her spine go cold and her throat go as dry as sawdust. Way out across the adjacent meadow, the earth now scarred and rutted with tire tracks, scorched and cratered from the grenade blast and littered with the carnage of the undead, Lily can see the distant forest. Up along the ridge, behind colonnades of ancient oaks and dense curtains of foliage, the woods teem with innumerable ragged figures birthing themselves from the shadows. pushing their way out of the undergrowth, hundreds of them, emerging stiff-legged and ravenous into the daylight. There are so many of them now that they resemble, from this distance, a black tide. A putrefied dark wave the width of a soccer field, slowly unfurling and rolling down the hill toward the noise and confusion of the prison. In that horrible instant, over the course of a single electrical impulse firing in her brain, Lily makes a spontaneous calculation. Within a matter of minutes, 10, perhaps maybe 15 at the most, the prison will be overrun. The governor climbs down the tank's steel hull and takes a supervisory position behind the stern of the Abrams. Most of the surviving inhabitants of the prison have now vanished inside cell blocks and outbuildings, but a few of the sturdier souls have remained outdoors, putting up half-hearted resistance, the intermittent crackle of suppressing fire and panicky shouts making Philip Blake twitch and flinch as he points at one of his soldiers. "Hey! You!" The governor signals to a tall, rangy man with a shaved head, who is busily firing his assault rifle at the barred windows of the nearest building. A man Philip has seen on Martinez's crew before, a man whose name Philip never bothered to learn. "Come here!" The man ceases firing and trots over to the governor. "Yes, sir?" The governor speaks with jaws clenched, his wounds tingling, the voices in his head plaguing him now like static crackling on a shortwave radio, distant signals from a ghostly transmission interfering with his thoughts. "There ain't many of them left," he shouts at the bald man. "I want you to gather a few of your men. Are you fucking listening to me?" A manic nod from the bald man. "Yes, sir, yes. I want you to take your men inside, understand? You're looking for anyone hiding or trying to hold out inside. You follow me?" "Yes, sir. And you want us to... what?" The governor snarls at him. "I want you to fucking read them a fucking bedtime story. You fucking idiot! I want you to waste them!" With a nod, the man with the shaved head whirls and runs off in the direction of the other gunman. The governor watches him for a moment, twitching, his blood-spattered face prickling hotly, his wounded jaw throbbing and feverish. He shakes off the voice reverberating behind his thoughts and murmurs to himself, "Only a matter of time now. So shut the fuck up. Leave me alone." He sees a shadow flit between two buildings dead ahead, 50 yards away. A small group of survivors huddled in an alcove, arguing. 2 men and a woman, and he ducks down behind the tank, raising Jared's Tech-9 and taking aim. He gets the woman in his front sight and squeezes off 3 quick blasts, the recoil nearly dislocating his shoulder, the distant puff of blood mist across the alcove invigorating to him, the sight of the woman dropping to the ground like a blast of smack in his veins. The governor nods with satisfaction. But before he can draw another breath, he sees the other 2 figures, an older man and a younger man, both clad in body armor, maybe father and son, suddenly dart out of the hiding place and make a run for it. They pass out of range quickly, charging toward the motorcade of battered prison vehicles parked along the west side of the grounds. The governor notices 3 of his gunmen milling around the base of the guard tower to his left, and he calls out to them, "Take them bastards down right now!" Within seconds, the men by the tower open up on the twosome, a barrage of automatic fire bursting like a drum roll, plumes of silver sparks flickering in the daylight, filling the air with ugly noise. The governor sees the crossfire engulf the 2 fleeing men, and a direct headshot knocks the younger man off his feet. The kid in the armor sprawls to the concrete in a swath of blood as dark as crude oil. The older man screeches to a halt and goes back to the younger man. The gunmen hold their fire now, as the older one tries to help the younger one up. It's hard to see exactly what's going on out there in the haze of blue smoke and dust. But it appears to the governor that the older one is sobbing, a father stroking a dying son, cradling the younger man's ruined skull in his lap, and then letting the wave of agony come out in sobs. The older man weeps and weeps now on the ground, holding the boy, oblivious to the dangers around him, presumably beyond caring about his own life. The whole thing makes the governor want to puke. Philip marches over to the militia members standing sheepishly by the tower, their guns lowered, their stricken gazes locked on the death scene across the yard. "What the fuck is your problem?" the governor demands as he approaches the first gunman. "Oh, God. Oh, God." The man in the Massey Ferguson hat and long sideburns, he goes by the moniker Smitty, once chatted with the governor at Woodbury's Main Street Tavern about shooting turkeys for Thanksgiving. Now the man's grizzled, wind-chapped face has fallen, his red-rimmed eyes welling with tears. I killed a boy." He fixes his anguished gaze on the governor. "I just killed that man's boy like he was some kind of sick animal." The governor throws a glance across the dusty yard and sees the older man, grizzled, graying temples, late 50s, maybe early 60s, on his knees, slumped over the boy, tears streaming down the geezer's face. From the jut of the man's jaw, his pomaded iron-gray hair, and the wind-burned lines around his eyes, he looks like a laborer or farmer, but with a certain gravitas which makes the crying all the more incongruous. The sight does nothing for the governor, makes no impression other than a slight tremor of alarm that nobody's blowing this wrinkled fuck away. The governor turns back to Smitty and says, "Listen to me. Listen, this is important. You listening?" The man named Smitty wipes his face with the back of his arm. "Yes, sir." "How many of our people did that so-called boy kill with his fucking rifle, huh? How many?" Smitty looks down. "Okay, I get it." The governor puts his gloved hand on the man's shoulder and squeezes. "You should be proud that you killed him." Then a gentle shove. "Come on, get your ass in gear. This isn't over yet." "Okay," Smitty says with a terse nod. "Okay." He looks down at his rifle and slams another shell in the breech with a grunt, his voice barely a whisper now. "Whatever." The governor has another thought, and starts to say something else when a streak of movement off to his left crosses his peripheral vision. He snaps his head toward the nearest building and sees 4 figures darting out of a side exit. At first, the governor just points and starts to say, There. But his words stick in his throat when the identity of 2 of these figures suddenly registers over the space of a heartbeat. He recognizes the big, handsome man named Rick, the self-proclaimed leader, limping furiously across the grounds, his tattered prison coveralls now bunched in the midsection with heavy bandages where he was shot. He trundles along with the woman on one flank, a little boy of about 9 on the other. Rick helps the woman leap over a pile of wreckage as though she's sick. Plunging through the fog bank of dust, wide-eyed and frantic, they look as if they're making a break for the far gate on the northwest corner of the yards. Following closely on their heels, the 4th figure, a younger woman in a stained white lab coat, carries a lever-action Winchester and already has the weapon raised to her eye. The governor recognizes Alice and suddenly cries out to his minions, "Take that backstabbing bitch down!" 30 yards to the east, under the overhang of Cell Block D, Lily Call sees the encounter developing across the wasted grounds. The first bark of automatic fire shattering the temporary lull in the assault, raising hackles on her neck, and she swings her gun up, forgetting just for a moment the oncoming horde of undead. Already the battalion of walking corpses, as densely packed as a stockyard full of cattle, have made their way down the far slopes of the meadow and have begun shuffling and trundling as one great undulating mob of rotting paralytics across the tall grass of the adjacent pasture. They look from this great distance like an invasion force, an army of dead centurions hailing from some hellish necropolis, arms outstretched, banging into each other, heads lolling, eyes like yellow reflectors catching the pale sunlight, coming into clearer and clearer focus as they approach the outer fences. From Lily's vantage point, their myriad varieties of age, shape, size, gender, and degree of decomposition are all still a blur, but they're getting close enough to smell and hear. The rancid aroma of gaseous decay and incessant choruses of toneless moaning rise on the gentle breezes of the afternoon. Distracted by the appearance of Rick Grimes, his family, and Alice, her adrenaline spiking with equal parts panic and rage, Lily has lost track of the terrible onslaught of the dead, and now grabs Austin with her free arm. "Look!" She pulls him toward the skirmish across the grounds. "Look who it is! Jesus Christ, Austin, come on!" They dash across the leprous cement of a defunct basketball court, their weapons raised and ready to fire. Dead ahead, about 20 yards away, half a dozen militiamen fire on the fleeing family. "Go! Keep running! Run!" Alice cries out at Rick, and then fires off a series of wild shots. Lily bounds headlong toward the fracas, her teeth cracking with tension. She sees Alice making a feeble attempt to keep firing long enough to give the Grimes family a chance to flee. But the nurse is quickly overcome. One of the rounds chews through her leg, knocking her feet out from under her, another one grazing her shoulder and sending her to the ground. Lily gets close enough to see the governor marching toward the nurse. Alice looks up with blood on her face, seeing 3 separate men approaching her commando style with muzzles raised, and she spits. "Fuck you!" She fires one last time, hitting one of the men next to the governor in the gut. "Fucking bitch!" The governor lunges at her and kicks her rifle from her hands. Lily approaches from the opposite direction with a Remington ready to fire, and she aims it down at the fallen nurse. She makes eye contact with Alice, and Alice holds her gaze, and for the briefest moment, the 2 women stare silently at each other. Lily can barely recognize the woman who was once her friend and confidant. Alice spits blood at Lily, and Lily feels a twinge of rage like a matchtip igniting in her guts. In her peripheral vision, she can see the Grimes family fleeing toward the far gates. A shot rings out, a near miss, sparking off the concrete at Rick's heels. The one-armed governor looms over the fallen nurse and jacks the cocking mechanism on his Tech-9 by yanking it down against his belt with a loud metallic click. His teeth are showing. He breathes thickly through his nostrils as Alice closes her eyes and looks away. She's ready to die. The governor aims the Tech-9 at her face and growls softly at her. "Traitor." The single burst from the Tech-9 makes Lily jump as the back of Alice's head erupts in a wet red particle bomb across the concrete. "Take him out," the governor says softly to Lily. But Lily doesn't hear him at first. "What?" She looks up from the murdered nurse. "What was that?" The governor scowls at Lily. "I said take those motherfuckers out." He points the pistol's muzzle at the fleeing family. "Now!" Lily assumes a shooting stance and squares her shoulders and sucks in a breath, raising the weapon toward the 3 figures fleeing in the distance. They are 25 yards away from freedom. Over the course of that next second and a half, before she puts the scope to her eye, Lily glimpses several things out of the corner of her eye that register like screaming warning alarms in her brain. She sees the other members of the governor's army whirling toward the devastated cyclone fence, some of them backing away, wide-eyed and jittery. Outside the mangled remnants of chain-link barricade, the tsunami of walking dead rolls toward the prison. Closing the distance to about 50 yards now, the leading edge of the herd looks like a nightmarish chorus line of encephalitic monsters dressed in ragged civvies, moldering suits, tattered dresses dark with bile, and denim overalls hanging in shreds, their autonomic yellow stares fixed on the fresh meat scurrying across the grounds. The stench engulfs the general area, mingling with the dust devils, forming a fog bank of death scent. The dissonant symphony of mortified vocal cords rises to the level of a psychotic marching band, now throbbing and droning with the off-key music of their insatiable moaning. Lily focuses on the task at hand and puts the scope to her eye. For a single, frenzied instant, she calculates the distance and the drop rate, and all at once she registers the fleeing woman, now running 1/2 step behind Rick Grimes and holding something close to her chest. Through the crosshairs, the woman's cargo looks like ordnance of some kind, a bomb, a bundle of grenades, a short-barreled automatic weapon wrapped in cloth. So Lily puts the woman in her sights. She holds her breath, puts the center hairs on the woman, and quickly, decisively yanks the trigger. The recoil punches Lily's shoulder, and 1 nanosecond later, she sees the woman come apart in the scope's telescopic lens. In the narrow, magnified field of vision, it looks like a silent movie death. The woman's back opening up in a bloom of scarlet, her body thrown off stride. The impact of the .308 round tearing through her body as well as her mystery package, sending fragments of bone, tissue, blood mist, and fabric into the air. The woman sprawls to the ground on top of the bundle, a tiny object flopping out of a blanket, visible now in the scope's tunnel vision. Lily freezes. The scope adheres to her eye socket as though dipped in liquid nitrogen. She stares at the object. Lily's midsection goes cold as she stares and stares at that pink, smooth object visible in the upper right quadrant of the scope. The distant howl of anguish from the man named Rick reaches Lily's ears. The man scuttles to a stop, gazing over his shoulder in absolute horror at his fallen wife. He stands paralyzed for a moment, staring at the fatally wounded woman and the object sticking out from under her chest. The boy reaches the fence and turns to see what happened, and the man waves him on. "Don't look back, Carl! Just keep running!" The boy darts toward a flatbed truck parked near the northwest gate as more shots ring out from some of the other militiamen. But now the man named Rick lunges toward the boy, grabs him. "No, Carl! We won't make it to the truck!" The man spins the child in the other direction. "We gotta go this way! Keep your head down, and whatever you do, don't stop running!" Lily barely notices the man and boy changing course, and heading back along the fence toward the opposite gate, which is now crowded with the first wave of walking dead, the leading edge of the herd shambling over the chain-link wreckage and pouring into the prison with mouths working and dead arms reaching and flailing. They come one by one through the massive gap in the fence, fanning out across the yards in their slow-motion stampede, hungry yellow eyes scanning. But Lily is beyond caring. She can't tear her gaze from the scope, or stop staring at the tiny, fleshy object sticking out from under the fallen wife. An object that reveals itself to be an arm. A baby's arm. At first, the governor doesn't notice Lily's catatonic stupor. He's preoccupied with the quickly shifting dangers coming at them. The first wave of corpses now less than 50 yards away, shuffling awkwardly across the cracked cement toward the surviving militia, spreading their stench and noise like a pox on the barren grounds. The governor can see Rick Grimes and his boy reach the gap between the two demolished fences and weave through the oncoming horde, the man firing into the heads of the closest creatures, making an opening through which they can escape, creating quite a racket. "Crazy fucks," Philip grumbles to his men. "Don't waste any more bullets. The biters will get 'em before we can." Sure enough, Rick and his son's frenzied flight begins to draw the attention of the leading edge of the herd, giving the governor and his men time to clean up and take possession of the prison. What the fuck? The governor notices the older man in body armor 25 yards away, slumped on his knees next to the body of his son. Why the fuck is that old bastard still breathing? Next to Philip, a gangly former high school math teacher nicknamed Red gives a nervous shrug, fingering the trigger pad of his AR-15, glancing over his shoulder at the herd bearing down on them, then glancing back at the old man in body armor. Wasn't moving. Dropped his gun, looked like he was surrendering. The governor walks over to the old man. The buzzing drone of the walkers fills the air. Philip feels as though ants are crawling on his skin. He can see the encroaching horde out of the corner of his one good eye. His phantom arm itches as he trains his cyclopean gaze down at the sobbing man with gray, slicked-back hair. The old man slowly looks up, as though seized up in a bad dream, still struggling to wake up. The two men make eye contact. "Dear God," he mutters softly, almost as if reciting a litany. "Please. Just kill me." The governor puts the muzzle of the Tech-9 against the furrowed brow of the old man. But he doesn't pull the trigger. Not at first. He just presses it against the man's forehead for an endless moment, staring, hearing the incessant crackle of radio interference in his head. Dust, dust, dead and gone. He's gone. Philip Blake is gone. The blast of the Tech-9 cuts off the voice and sends the old man into the void. For a moment, Philip Blake stares down at the old man now lying in a fresh pool of deep crimson blood next to his son. The puddle spreading, forming wings on the cement like a Rorschach inkblot test. Two angels lying in state, one next to the other. Martyrs. Sacrificial lambs. Philip starts to turn away when he hears another voice, anguished and grief-stricken, coming from somewhere nearby. He turns and sees that Lily Call has moved across the yard and now stands over the Grimes woman, who lies frozen in death on top of the pale remains of her baby. Austin Ballard stands 20 feet away from her, looking horror-struck and confused, spinning toward the oncoming biters. The herd has progressed across the grounds, closing the distance to about 30 yards or so. The stink and noise have risen to unbearable levels, and now some of the governor's men have begun firing at the front line, picking off the closest ones, one after another, the escaping fluids painting the weathered cement day-glow red and squid ink black. "What the fuck is her problem?" the governor says to no one in particular, as he strides over to where Lily stands, slowly shaking her head, her Remington still gripped in one hand, tendrils of glistening auburn hair unmoored from her ponytail and dangling in her face. The governor yells at her. "What the fuck is wrong with you? We gotta get our asses inside. What is your fucking deal? Answer me!" Very slowly, she turns and scorches him with such a contemptuous look that it nearly takes his breath away. She utters something that he doesn't hear at first, his one-eyed gaze held rapt by her blazing stare. "What was that?" he demands of her, his single-gloved hand balling into a fist. "You monster," she says again, louder this time through clenched teeth. The governor goes very still, serpentine still, a boa coiling itself in the presence of a threat. All this in spite of the looming threat of the horde filling the general vicinity with the odor of rotten meat and the sound of broken gears grinding and groaning. Very carefully, enunciating every word, the governor says, "What the fuck did you just say to me?" Austin whirls toward the governor and raises his gun as though trying to decide whom to shoot. "I said," Lily Call barks at him, her words like darts now, projectiles aimed at his face, fueled by scalding tears tracking down her face. "You are a fucking monster! Look at what you made me do!" Without tearing her gaze from him, she gestures down at the murdered woman and baby, the pathetic carnage joined in the eternal bond of mother clutching child to her bosom. "Just fucking look!" He does look now. And he does see. And maybe for the first time since he took control of Woodbury, Georgia, since he became the governor, the man who calls himself Philip Blake does see the consequences of his actions. "Fuck," he utters to himself, his voice drowned by the clamor of gunfire staving off the pitiless, rotting, hellish onslaught now bearing down on them. "A baby!" Lily roars at him. "A baby!" She turns her gun around and slams the butt into the governor's face. The pain shoots up the bridge of his nose, the impact making a wet thud that momentarily blinds him and drives him to the ground. "You made me kill a fucking baby!" The governor flops onto his back and tries to sit up, but his head is ringing like an alarm, the dizziness washing over him and stealing his breath. "What are you—" Lily Call turns the barrel of her Remington around and lunges at him. She rams the blue steel muzzle into his mouth hard enough to crack two of his front teeth. The barrel lodges itself so deep in his throat that it forces a strangled gag out of him. Lily's finger starts to tighten on the trigger. Philip Blake's single eye finds her eyes. The entire world seems to stop, time standing still, as if hell has at last frozen over. Part 3. The Fall. Chapter 17. "Lily, Don't! The voice blurts out of the closest militia member, Hap Abernathy, the retired bus driver in his soiled Atlanta Braves cap and gray eyes, now bugging as big as silver dollars, as the other men press him toward the horrible tableau. Some of them involuntarily raise their hands. Others aim their guns at Lily's head. She barely notices her fellow combatants as she stares down intensely at the kneeling governor, the barrel of her Remington still thrust into the man's mouth. Why isn't she firing? Inside her brain, a clock ticks. Impassive, cold, cruel, undeniable. Counting off the moments until she finally decides to yank the trigger the rest of the way and bring this terrible era to a conclusion. But she doesn't pull the lever. She just stares. Into the face of the poster boy for all that is base and feral and brutal in the human animal. What Lily doesn't realize, though, at that moment, is that the gunmen have momentarily lost track of the oncoming horde. The first walkers, now shuffling a few paces ahead of the herd, have closed the distance across the weather-beaten grounds to about 25 yards. Now they lock their glassy doll eyes on the humans and trundle awkwardly toward the sweet scent of living tissue, their dead arms rising, their fingers curled into talons and innately reaching, clawing the air, eager to rip into the living. "Lily, listen to me," Austin Ballard says as he pushes his way through the other gunmen, pressing in next to her, speaking softly yet urgently into her ear. "You don't have to do this. Listen to me, there are other ways to handle this. You don't need to do this." A single tear traces down from the corner of Lily's eye and drips off the edge of her jawline. "A baby, Austin. It was a baby." Austin fights his own tears. "I know, sweetie, but listen. Listen to me. This is not the way to—" He doesn't get a chance to finish his thought, because a long shadow suddenly blots out the sun. His Glock still gripped in his right hand, Austin jerks around a split second before the first slimy, molting claw-like fingers take a swipe at him with feral bloodlust. Lily twists around and screams. Austin jerks back and squeezes off 4 quick blasts, number 1 going high, numbers 2 and 3 going into the head of the closest biter, number 4 hitting a second one in the jugular. The first biter convulses, a flood of brain fluid and blood showering down over its body before it collapses to the pavement. The second biter rears back, its neck gushing, but it doesn't go down. It merely backs into its brethren, stupidly knocking over a couple of smaller creatures. Meanwhile, the rest of the militiamen scatter, furiously blasting away the army of reanimated corpses engulfing the area. The dusty haze flickers with gunfire, sparking ricochets and plumes of muzzle flares percolating out of the assault rifles on full auto. Some of the men make mad dashes for the closest ingress, a door partially visible in the shadows of a nearby alcove, while others fire frantically into the heart of the encroaching herd, sending fragments of rotten flesh flying off in all directions. Lily turns back to the governor at the exact moment he makes his move. Grabbing the barrel of the Remington, Philip slams the butt of the rifle as hard as he can into Lily's face. The stock hits her chin, the impact splitting her lower lip, chipping a tooth, sending Roman candles of stars across her field of vision, and knocking her momentarily senseless. She jolts back with a start. The gun slips from her hands and clatters to the pavement as the governor springs to his feet. A biter lunges at Lily, and she smashes a boot into its midsection at the last possible moment. The dead teenager in gouged black leather doubles over and staggers backward, but doesn't go down. Lily manages to dart away, and while she runs, she reaches around to the back of her belt and grabs her .22, despite her double vision and throbbing, wet, bleeding lip. "Lily! This way!" Austin stands 20 feet north of her now, firing into another wave of biters coming from the opposite direction. He frantically indicates the alcove about 35 feet away. Lily hesitates. She glances over her shoulder. She sees the governor whirling around with the Remington rifle in his hands. He blows away a female biter at point-blank range, practically vaporizing the crone's gray head in an eruption of moldering scalp and particles of rotting brain tissue. The blowback sprays across his face and makes him flinch and stagger backward, coughing and spitting. A scream rings out in the opposite direction, and Lily spins around in time to see a Woodbury man, a squat, heavy-set pipe fitter from Augusta named Clint Mansell, succumb to the black teeth of a huge male walker. The corpse latches onto the portly man's neck, burrowing into the hemorrhaging nerve bundle underneath the fat, while another biter pounces on the man's back. Clint Mansell's watery, choked death cry as he goes down gets the rest of the men moving. "There's too many of them!" cries one of the older men as he backs toward the alcove, firing bursts from his AK at the gathering horde. Lily gets off a series of controlled blasts at a cluster of biters that are closing in on her. Each shot slams through a rotten cranium, sending plumes of black matter out the back of every skull, when she hears the psychotic jabber of the governor behind her. "Don't panic! They can't outrun— Where the fuck is— Shut up and listen to me! We can shut the fuck up! We can get inside clear out we can rebuild we've gotta stick together, people! Fuck! We can make this work!" All at once, Lily feels a tingling sensation at the base of her spine, and a strange kind of stillness coursing over her, the noise and chaos fading in her ears to a low drone. She ejects the spent magazine from the Ruger, draws another one from her belt, slams it into the hilt, and racks the slide. Then she turns toward the governor, who is gibbering at the voices in his head, his back turned to her. She has about 60 seconds before the next cluster of biters reaches her. She blocks out everything. The pain, the sound of Austin's voice calling out to her, the fear, the pandemonium, everything. 30 seconds now before the governor spins around and sees her. She aims the Ruger at the back of his head and she sucks in a breath. 15 seconds. She aims. 10 seconds. She fires. Considering the fact that the .22 caliber long rifle 40-grain round strikes the governor in the back of his head, plowing through his brain and exiting out his eye socket, he feels surprisingly little pain. His one good eyeball jettisons into the air on the wake of a bloody thread, and the cold wind slams through the trough in his head. For one horrible instant, like a brain surgery patient remaining lucid and semi-conscious during his procedure, he remains upright, standing on faltering knees, his back to his assailant, only semi-aware of his mortality rushing toward him with the unstoppable inertia and brilliant white light of a freight train. A mere fraction of a second passes before his frontal lobe and the rest of his brain shut down and stop sending involuntary signals to his central nervous system. But it's enough time for his condition to register to the deepest chasms of his brain, the bad news spreading throughout his cerebral lobes and hemispheres, his memory centers, and the mysterious fissures and convolutions of his secret disorder. The voice in his head returns with renewed strength, giving him even worse news that will carry him into oblivion. Philip Blake has been gone for nearly a year. Philip Blake is dust. Gone. The governor's reign has been a sham. A lie. A garbled yowl comes out of the governor as he blindly staggers for a brief instant, trying to argue one last time with the voice in his head, his body now as heavy as an elephant, a dying elephant gripped in the paralysis of its own dead weight. The oncoming swarm of biters closes in, their talon-like fingers reaching en masse for the governor's warm, nourishing flesh. Their cumulative jet engine drone of rancid breath and watery groans makes one last impression on the governor's auditory nerves, the noise of the biter stampede engulfing him and drowning the inner voice needling the governor with the savage truth. He's gone. He's been gone for ages. He's in the ground, dead, gone. He no longer exists. The governor barely feels the sensation of being kicked in the small of the back by Lily. Her final nudge sends him reeling forward blindly, his one good arm pinwheeling futilely, almost comically like the fin of a fish, as he plunges into the rotting, desiccated bosom of the reanimated cadavers. The biters practically catch him with their flailing arms and snapping jaws. and he collapses into the throng, writhing in the awful darkness, finding his voice one last time. "Philip Blake lives!" His death cry, albeit hoarse and bloodless and papery thin, is shockingly audible and clear to all those within 100-foot radius. "Philip Blake lives!" he shrieks, as the blackened, slimy teeth descend upon him, driving him to the ground, incisors tearing great mouthfuls of his clothes, burrowing into the soft spots in the seams of his body armor. They go for his exposed neck. They go for his extremities. They go for the concavities of his wounds, chewing through his eye patch, ferreting down into the pulsing meat of his hollowed-out eye socket. They tear through his nose and suck the tissue from his nasal cavity with the vigor of truffle hogs rooting for delicacies. The last warm remnants of the governor's life flow out of him in one great hemorrhage that inundates his attackers in a baptismal bath, until the feeding frenzy begins to disconnect flesh and sinew from bone, drawing and quartering the body into more manageable pieces. The last ghostly blips of brain activity like a vinyl record stuck on the same incessant skipping phrase over and over again. "Philip Blake lives! Philip 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 Blake lives!" Within moments there's nothing left but the feeding and the blood, and the eternal white noise of Brian Blake's mind screen at the end of its programming day. Now it occurs to Lily Call, as she backs away from the horrible scene, bristling with terror, both her Rugers drawn, one in each hand, that the unintended effect of the governor being devoured by the very creatures he once used as entertainment is a slim opportunity opening up for the survivors, a momentary diversion, as scores of biters engulf the heaping pile of fresh meat. The onslaught is stalled, drawn to the commotion of the feeding frenzy, more and more of the creatures pressing in to get a taste of the still warm human remains. The lull in the stampede has left the remaining members of the Woodbury militia standing paralyzed between the herd and the closest building, stricken dumb, staring, watching their leader being reduced to slimy, wet shreds of tissue and clothing before their eyes. Moving on pure adrenaline now, Lily quickly assesses the situation. In all the excitement, she has momentarily lost track of Austin. But right then, before she has a chance to figure out what happened to him, she sees a clear path to the closest alcove entrance. "Hey!" She tries to get the other combatant's attention, gazing across the ground to the horrified remnant of 4 men and 1 woman, Matthew, Hap, Ben, Speed, and Gloria Pine, as they back toward the building. "Look at me! All of you, look at me!" For a single instant, amidst the adrenaline-soaked horrors of that swarming, smoke-bound prison yard, a subtle yet instant shift in power occurs. Lily finds a voice that she didn't know she had, a strange baritone shout from deep within her. Her father's voice, firm but fair, steadfast but humble, and strong enough to shout a coyote off a porch, and she aims it at the group of survivors. "That's gonna slow a few of them down, but not for long!" She indicates the feeding frenzy in progress across the grounds, and then jerks a thumb at the nearest alcove draped in shadows. "Come on! Everybody follow me!" Lily starts toward the building, the others following her, some of them snapping out of their dazes and firing shots into the swarm. Some of the horde is separated from the feeding frenzy and are lumbering toward the humans, and a series of shots on the fly takes them down in puffs of brain fluid and pieces of rotting skull flying up into the haze. "Keep moving and keep shooting!" Lily hollers. "I'm almost out of ammo! We've got to get—" A loud booming blast from behind her cuts off her words, and she whirls in time to see Austin, careening backward to the ground, a pair of biters clawing at his legs, his Glock emptying the last rounds of its last magazine across the tops of the creatures' heads. Unfortunately, the rounds take the male down but just graze the skull of the female. Austin screams a curse and kicks and flails at her. The big-bellied former housewife, still dressed in her filthy terry-cloth robe, curlers in her slimy hair, snaps her rotten teeth at Austin's wrists and flailing legs. "Austin!" Lily charges toward him, closing the gap between them in mere seconds, maybe 30 feet or so, raising both .22s as she runs, sending surgically precise blasts across the distance at the dead housewife. Direct headshots drive the monstrous woman off Austin in a series of skull-shattering eruptions of meat and glistening gray matter until half her head is gone. She lands beside Austin, her cranium trepanned open like a hollowed-out gourd, showing a cross-section of her infected cerebrum with the scientific precision of a high school biology class. Gas expels from the depths of her malodorous brain cavity, and Austin rolls over, coughing and gagging. Lily reaches him, shoves her pistols into her belt, and latches onto one of Austin's hands with the strength of an iron vise. She yanks him to his feet. "Come on, pretty boy, we're out of here." "Fun with me," he utters in a strangled voice, levering himself up. The two of them race toward the alcove, leading the others out of harm's way, through a breached metal door, and into the unknown chambers of Cell Block D. Fueled by the eating frenzy, bolstered by the growing number of walkers hauling themselves through the gaps in the fences, the herd engulfs the prison grounds in short order, until multitudes of ragged, molting figures are clumsily crowding every corner, every square foot of every yard and basketball court and walkway. Some of them find entry into buildings through gaping doorways, left open by the exodus of inhabitants. The incredible noise and stink floods the passageways and echoes up into the impassive gunmetal sky. From high on the ridges overlooking the property, the last of the fleeing inhabitants pauses to gaze back at their temporary home being overrun by the walking dead. If there is a more indelible portrait of the world's end, no single soul gazing back at that derelict prison property that day can think of what it would be. The vast compound stretching across several hundred acres of pasture land virtually swims with upright corpses. From such a distant vantage point, it resembles so many black dots in a hellish, pointillist painting, the shambling horde filling every nook and cranny, thousands of them, many cocking their dead faces toward the uncaring heavens and letting out yawps and groans as if being consumed from the inside by their overwhelming, cancerous, inescapable hunger. The sight of it brings tears to the eyes of those who lived there in relative safety for many months. The image will live in their minds for the rest of their lives. The prison has become a bellwether of doom. The last few souls slipping away that day into the adjacent woods stare down at the swarm only briefly, unable to bear looking at it for long, before turning away and beginning the next phase of their arduous search for shelter. A massive thud reverberates the bones of the receiving room, making everybody jump. The prison is collapsing under the weight of the onslaught, the troubling din of thousands of shuffling feet and mortified vocal cords moaning incessantly inside and out, filling the air, as the surviving members of the Woodbury militia huddle in the middle of a desolate, fly-specked littered foyer, trying to catch their breaths and figure out their next move. "Austin!" Lily points at a rack along the room's back wall, upon which are stacked signposts and flagpoles and implements. "Do me a favor and grab one of those signpoles and reinforce that side door." Shuffling with a limp, Austin hurries across the room and grabs one of the iron stands. He turns to a side exit situated under a powerless Corridor D1 sign and slams the object down across the middle of the door, wedging it under the broken bolt plate and a side hinge at the precise moment another muffled thud strikes outside the door. Austin jerks with a start as plaster dust rains down and metal creaks, the force of multiple walkers outside the door pressing to get in, trying to get to the source of the human smells that are taunting them. "They're gonna break that fucking door in!" Matthew Hennessy cries out from the front of the room. "There's too fucking many of them!" "No, there's not." Lily rushes over to the front entrance and starts pushing a metal credenza brimming with heavy file folders and directories across the boarded glass of the front door. "Come on, give me a hand with this. Matthew and Ben, get your asses over here!" They heave and push the immense shelving unit across the door. The room is a little less than 500 square feet of shop-worn tile flooring and painted cinder block walls, scarred with illegible graffiti and the wear and tear of generations of intake procedures. The air smells chalky and sour, like the inside of an old refrigerator. One wall houses the grimy glass-fronted guard desk, elevated to shoulder height, where newcomers became official wards of the state of Georgia. Another wall is gouged with bullet holes and the cracked, dangling framed portraits of former wardens and state officials. A lack of power has plunged the room into cold darkness, but the ambient daylight from outside the high, barred windows provides enough illumination for Lily to see the owlish, terrified faces of her contingent. In addition to Lily and Austin, the ragtag group of surviving Woodbury militia consists of the following 4 men and 1 woman, now huddled in a tight group in the middle of the receiving room. Matthew Hennessy, the 20-something bricklayer from Valdosta, now draped in half-empty mag pouches and a sweat-soaked camo jacket. Hap Abernathy, the gaunt, graying retired school bus driver from Atlanta, who currently looks like a candidate for a hip replacement with his pronounced limp and bandaged ribs. Ben Buckholtz, a pouchy-eyed man from Pine Mountain, who lost his entire family last year in a swarm outside F.D. Roosevelt State Park, and now appears to be flashing back to that earlier trauma. Speed Wilkins, a cocky 19-year-old high school football star from Athens who, at the moment, looks punch-drunk and dazed by the struggle, all his big man-on-campus swagger long gone. And Gloria Pine, her wounded leg wrapped in a crude bandage, her deeply creased, world-weary eyes still glowering out from underneath her I'm with stupid visor, the headgear frayed and spattered with blood and soot. Another thud makes them all jump. "Take it easy, everybody." Lily stands before them with her back to the front entrance door. Each of her Rugers is shoved behind her belt on an opposing hip for easy access, but the problem is, she only has about 6 rounds left in one magazine and 1 round in another, with an extra bullet in each chamber. The sound of scraping sets her teeth on edge, and the pressure makes the credenza tremble and creak as the swarm shoves against the door. "This is hugely important, that we stay calm and don't panic." "Are you shitting me?" Hap Abernathy trains his ancient gray eyes on her. "Stay calm? Did you happen to notice how many of them things are out there? It's only a matter of time before—" "Shut up!" Austin booms at the man with fire in his eyes, his outburst uncharacteristic enough to raise even Lily's eyebrows. "Just shut the fuck up and let the lady talk, or maybe you want to just—" "Austin!" Lily gives him a gentle warning wave of her gloved hand. She still wears the fingerless driving gloves that Austin gave her the previous night. "It's okay. He's just expressing what everybody's thinking." Lily looks at all of them, one at a time, that voice of her father coming through. "I'm asking all of you to trust me, and now we'll get you out of here." She waits for everybody to get their breath back, get their bearings. Hap Abernathy stares at the floor, cradling his AR-15 as though it were a security blanket. Another thud makes them jerk. A cracking noise comes from the depths of the prison. Something falls and shatters above them. The walkers have gotten inside Cell Block D. One of the back entrances had been left open. But nobody knows how many of them have infiltrated the building or what parts of the prison are still secure. "Hap?" Lily speaks softly to him. "You okay? You with me on this?" He nods slowly, staring at the floor. "Yes, ma'am. I'm with you." A beat of noisy silence follows as the creaking noises and low, ubiquitous drone of Walking Dead pressing in on them grips the air with unbearable tension. The thing that nobody expresses at that moment, the gorilla in the room that they all tried desperately to ignore, is Lily's assassination of the governor in plain view of everybody only moments earlier. Deep down inside all of them, they expected it to happen in some form sooner or later. They are all children of an abusive father trying to recover from the inevitable yet logical outcome of situations such as these. And like abused children everywhere, they have already begun to repress their unresolved feelings. They look at Lily now with new eyes. They wait for her to lead. "We're safe here in this room," she says at last. "For the time being, at least. We'll keep close watch on the high windows and keep the doors as secure as possible. How much ammunition does everybody have?" It takes a moment for them to figure this out. In all the excitement, they have lost track. Matthew has the deepest reserve, a couple dozen 7.62mm slugs in his cargo pocket, and 7 more in the AK's magazine, but the rest of them have paltry supplies. Ben's got 11 115-grain 9mm rounds left for his Glock 19. Gloria's got a full mag of 305.56mm slugs for her AR-15, and Hap's got a revolver with 6 rounds left. Speed's got a Bushmaster with 5 rounds still in the clip, and Austin has a single round remaining in his M1 Garand. Gloria loans him her spare Glock 17, which makes Lily wonder how many bullets she has left in 2 separate magazines for her .22 caliber pistols. She checks them, and confirms that she only has 4 rounds remaining.
Okay, so we're not exactly loaded to the teeth, but we're safe here.
Gloria finally speaks up, taking off her visor and running her fingers through her dyed red hair.
Then what? What's the plan? We can't just stay in this fucking room indefinitely.
Lily nods.
I'm thinking we wait out the swarm. Give them a chance to clear a little bit.
She looks at them, giving each of them a respectful look as though offering them an option when they really have none.
We stay the night, and then we'll reassess in the morning.
A long silence follows, but nobody argues with her. Late that night, after each of the 6 survivors have staked out private little corners and recesses within the confines of the intake room, mostly for the purpose of trying to get some semblance of rest, Lily and Austin find themselves ensconced in the shadows behind the glass-fronted receiving counter. They spread a tarpaulin from the room's storage locker across the floor for a modicum of comfort, and now they sit slumped on the tarp, their guns on the shelf behind them, their backs resting against the file cabinets along the back wall, as the relentless drone of walkers continues unabated outside the barricaded doors and windows. For the longest time, neither Lily nor Austin says a word. They merely pass the time holding each other, stroking each other's arms and hair. After all, what is there to say? The world has spiraled out of control, and they're just trying to hold on. But Lily can't turn her mind off. She keeps dabbing the pearls of blood oozing from her split lip with a Kleenex, and noticing little things around them that don't add up, such as the pine tree deodorizer hanging from the desk lamp above her, or the unexplained bloodstain on the ceiling, or the lump under Austin's sleeve.
Wait a minute,
she says at one point very late that night, her stomach growling from nerves and the empty feeling of not having eaten anything for almost 24 hours. She looks at the sleeve of Austin's leather jacket and realizes there are 2 puncture holes directly over the lump.
What is that?
Okay, now don't get all bent out of shape on me, Austin says as Lily reaches down and pulls up a sleeve. Under the cuff, a faded blue bandana is wrapped around Austin's wrist, the cloth soaked in blood. Lily gently pulls the bandana back and sees the telltale puncture wounds.
Oh, God, no,
she utters under her breath.
Please tell me you cut yourself on the fence.
From the look on his narrow face peering out at her through unruly tendrils of curly hair, an uncanny mixture of sadness, resolve, anguish, and calm, it's clear he didn't hurt himself on barbed wire. Chapter 18. Already beginning to darken and turn livid around the edges with infection, the bite marks are so severe, perhaps deep enough to have nipped an artery, that it's a miracle Austin hasn't bled to death. Lily springs to her feet, mind racing, heart thumping in her chest. She yammers for a moment. Jesus. Austin, we have to... Jesus Christ, the first aid kits are in the... Fuck! Austin hoists himself to his feet, replacing the bandana, wrapping it around the wound. He starts to say something, but Lily is busily whirling around, madly searching the shelves and drawers of the intake office for something, anything to stanch the infection. We have to take care of it immediately before... Shit! She throws open drawers, rifling through old documents, dusty intake forms, office supplies, candy wrappers, empty bottles of booze. She glances back at Austin and blurts out, "A tourniquet!"
Lily.
She reaches down to the tails of her denim shirt, starts ripping off a strip of fabric, her hands trembling.
We need to apply a tourniquet before...
What the hell's going on?
The voice comes from the opposite end of the intake counter. A figure standing outside the glass partition, audible through the pass-through slot. Gloria Pine has a packing blanket wrapped around her, and from the puffy redness underneath her eyes, she appears to be half asleep. She knocks on the glass. Lily takes a breath and tries to appear semi-calm.
It's nothing, Gloria. It's just... what's wrong with Austin?
She notices the bloody bandana. Two other figures, Hap and Ben, appear behind her, gazing through the glass.
Is that a bite?
Gloria stares at the blood-soaked cloth around his wrist.
Did he get bit out there?
No, goddamn, he just...
Lily.
Come here for a second. Austin speaks softly to her. He puts his good arm around her and gives her a gentle squeeze. He looks into her eyes and smiles sadly. It's too late.
What? No, what the fuck are you talking about?
It's too late, kiddo.
No, fuck no, don't say that!
She gazes across the dusty vestibule and sees the entire group now gathered outside the glass, the moonbeam slanting down through the high lintels, silhouetting their tense stares. They're all gaping at Austin.
Lily,
Austin starts to say, but she cuts him off with a raised hand. She turns toward the others.
Go back to sleep, goddammit, all of you! Go on, go back! Give us some fucking privacy!
Slowly, one by one, they turn away from the glass and slip back into the shadows of the foyer. In the silence that ensues, Lily turns and searches for the right words. She will not allow him to give up. Austin touches her face. It was bound to happen sooner or later.
What the fuck are you talking about?
She blinks away the tears. She can't afford to cry right now. Maybe someday she'll be able to cry again, but not now. Now she has to think of something, fast.
Okay, look. I'm gonna have to do something radical here.
He shakes his head calmly.
I know what you're thinking.
Unfortunately, the thing has already gone way beyond amputation, Lily. I can feel the fever. The thing has already spread. There's nothing you can do. It's too late.
God damn it, would you stop saying that?
She pulls away from him.
I'm not gonna lose you.
Lily,
no! This is unacceptable.
She licks her lips, gazing around the enclosure, thinking, searching for some answer. She looks back at Austin, and she sees the expression on his face. And all at once the fight goes out of her, and she realizes there is indeed nothing she can do for him. Like a balloon deflating, she sags, letting out an anguished sigh.
When did it happen? Was it that big lady walker jumped you before we came inside?
He nods. His expression remains tranquil, almost beatific, like a person who's had a religious conversion. He strokes her shoulder. You're gonna survive this thing. I just know it. If anybody can do it, you can. Austin, at the time I got left, I don't want to, dwell on it. Lily wipes the tears from her eyes.
There's so much we don't know. I heard about this one victim up near Macon who never turned. They got a fucking finger chewed off, and they never fucking turned.
Austin lets out a sigh, smiling to himself. And unicorns exist. She takes him by the shoulders and burns her gaze into his eyes.
You're not gonna die.
He shrugs. Yeah, I am. We all are, sooner or later. But you got a good shot at avoiding it for a long time. You're gonna get out of here. She wipes her face, the sorrow and horror rising up her gorge and threatening to break her into a million pieces. But she stamps it down, shoves it back, swallows it, hard. We're all gonna get out of here, pretty boy. He gives her another weary nod, and then he sits back down on the tarp, leaning back against the wall. If I'm not mistaken, I think I saw a flask in one of those drawers you were banging around in. He gives her one of his patented rock star smiles,
brushing wisps of curly hair from his ashen face. "If there's a God, there'll be liquor left in there." They stay wide awake the rest of the night, sharing the last few fingers of stale hooch in the flask left behind by some overworked intake guard. Throughout the wee hours, they talk softly, careful not to be heard by the others out in the foyer, discussing everything but Austin's bite wound. They talk about how they're going to get out of this place, whether they might find any supplies in other parts of the prison, and how they might avoid the infestation of walkers currently skulking around the corridors of the building. Lily puts Austin's condition out of her mind. She has a job to do. Get these people home safely, and she has assumed the mantle of leadership as readily as slipping into a new wardrobe, as easily as pulling a trigger, as quickly as a shot to the head. They talk about how the people in Woodbury will react to Philip Blake's death. And for a while, Lily fantasizes about a new Woodbury, a place where people can breathe and live in peace and take care of each other. She wants this badly, but neither she nor Austin can admit to themselves how far-fetched it all sounds, how slim their odds are of even escaping this godforsaken prison with their